the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA096.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Alrighty, we are recording up and running. Taylor, welcome to Doomed to Fail. I'm going to introduce us for the first time on time. We are a podcast about who even knows anymore. All we know is I released 2 episodes, one that Taylor does the work for and one that I do the work for twice a week. And that's all we know. That's all we
I
know.
love that. I love that for us. I'm trying to like describe who we are on social media before I start talking on like a TikTok because I know people do that. And so I've been like Doomed to Fail, a podcast we talk about historical failures and disasters, things that went wrong, and then I talk about a thing. I don't know if that's working. It's not, but that's my new plan.
Good.
Among many plans that
We
are
will
mediocre.
we will keep mixing it up and see what sticks. Eventually, one of them will. So, how you doing, Taylor?
I'm good. I just took a really nice nap. We had a very big Saturday. We had 2 baseball games and a piano recital and a birthday party, and it was a lot. And we had guests over. Um, our sister-in-law and nephew are here. Evelyn, you can come in. They're sleeping in my office, but we are good.
Nice,
Having a
nice.
good
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, my weekend has been very not relaxing and just like working on house stuff. Man, it is never ending.
It's
Just
never
absolutely
ending.
never ending.
A
And it's
thousand
so
percent.
exhausting. And
Mhm.
like I look at like people I know on their stories on Instagram and it's like they're out, they're like socializing, they're trying out the cool new restaurants in town and having fun looking drinks. I'm like I was like nailing weather stripping to the side of the garage earlier today.
Good for you.
That's my life.
Good for you. I love that for
So
you.
So yeah, let's go ahead and kick things off. I think if I remember right, you go first today.
I do. I do. Thank you. And do you remember when we used to do like themed drinks?
Oh
Mm,
yeah,
like
what
that?
happened to that?
I don't know. I'm not doing that anymore, but I am drinking Diet Coke. I was like, if I drink this Diet Coke, will I feel worse or will I feel better? And it's probably worse, but like I just really want it. But this, I'm using this crazy cup. It doesn't look crazy in this video, but I'm gonna do this. No. It's just like very long. Look, can you tell that it's
It's a wine
exaggerated?
glass.
But it's got like a really long stem.
Got it. Got it. Okay.
And I don't know why I feel like this is the way I want to enjoy my Diet Coke right now, but it is. Can you hear that?
Yeah, I love it.
Diet
I
Coke.
love it.
Diet Coke, call me. I'll work for you, Diet Coke. Anyway,
Are you
um,
ASMRing
yeah,
us?
Diet Coke.
Okay.
So I want to have a fancy glass because I have a fancy story to tell you. Sort of. Maybe fancy is the wrong word, but it's about a fancy party that was doomed. So I'm not going to make you guess because I don't think you'll have any idea what it was, what
Yeah,
it is.
because I don't go to fancy things, nor am I invited to them.
And
So
this was in 14th century France, so you wouldn't have been
yeah,
invited.
there you
You
go.
know, you
There
know,
you
they had a strict no fars policy back then.
go.
Um, so let's go back to 14th century France. I'm going to talk about King Charles the Sixth, who was mad, like crazy mad, you know, the word for crazy. And he threw a party in 1393, and it turned into a party that they call the, wait, I literally just listened to this like 7 times so I could pronounce it. Ball des Ardents. Des Ardents. I wrote it down. Ball des Ardents. Ardents. Ball des Ardents. Anyway, it's the Ball of the Burning Men, which is what I'm going to say from now on. And it is less fun than Burning Man because people actually burn to death in this story. So it's a little bit historical, royal stuff, and a little bit public fire.
Do you think any of those people were also on shrooms?
Uh, I think they were drunk. They might have accidentally been on shrooms, but I feel like you probably were a lot during Middle Ages,
Yeah, it's probably a lot of
you
fungus, a
know?
lot of weird things growing on the walls that you inhale and
Yeah.
get kind of high with. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
fair.
yeah, it wasn't great. It wasn't great. But Charles VI is actually very interesting. He has a whole like insanity part of him that I'll talk about a little bit. But I do think that there's probably more that we could talk about. I read a book called A Distant Mirror a long time ago about the 14th century, so I had pulled a little bit from that. And I have some Wikipedia stuff and then an article I found on JSTOR called The French King Who Believed He Was Made of Glass, which we'll get to. Um, But Charles the Sixth was the King of France. When he first was the King of France, he was called Charles the Beloved. So everybody, like, he was basically a child when he became king. He was born on December 3rd, 1368, and he became king when he was 11 on November 4th, 1380. So his dad was Charles V, and we're in the middle of the Hundred Years' War during this time. Do you remember what that was about?
I don't, but I do know that it wasn't 100 years. It was like intermittent periods of war.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. It was France and England fighting like they always did until like now. I don't know why they haven't tried to invade each other in a while, but like that would spice things up a little bit, I feel like, in the world. Not against that.
That's all we need.
Um, yeah, come on. But the Hundred Years' War, you're correct. It was 116 years, 4 months, 3 weeks, and 4 days, comprised of three different wars. There was the Edwardian War, the Caroline War, and the Lancastrian War. And we are at the tail end of the Caroline War, which was 1369 to 1389. So we're at the tail end of that part during this, and then it cools off, and then it happens again, and it's just like a bunch of back and forth. Um, because he was only 11, his uncles, the Duke of Burgundy and the Duke of Anjou, were his regents. So they're the ones who like made the decisions for him. And the problem was his uncles hadn't really been involved before that. They kind of just showed up and they were like, we have some new ideas. And they started doing those ideas, and the people didn't like it very much. Um, his dad had been very like, less taxes, we'll be nicer to people. And these uncles are like, more taxes, meaner to people, make life even harder than it should be because we're in medieval times, which was hard. You remember
Well, this
thinking
would have
about
been
medieval times.
during the Black Plague too,
Yeah, bad time to be alive.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The fact that anyone is like born and like survives childbirth and like lives during this is just like gross and total. And I was listening to like our Cyrus the Great episode from last week, and like it's all very Game of Thronesy also, all of those things. Like I feel like we can imagine these times because of what we've seen on TV, and who knows if it's how accurate that is or not, because I'm looking at like the images that we have from this time, and they're like a tapestry.
Yeah.
So who the fuck knows what it really looked like. But so the uncles, when he was 20, he dismissed his uncles and brought back the marmosets, which were a group of people who were like, who swore friendship to each other, which is hilarious, but they never wanted to like, they were all going to work together equally. And they wanted less taxes and peace with England. So that was nice. So there was like a 5-year truce after this, and people started to like calm down a little bit. Things started to get better for like the regular people. And people were like, great, Charles the Sixth is headed in the right direction, and all is well for the most part. Then they start to have some issues with Charles's mental illness, and he starts to like see things and hear things and like think things that aren't true. So in 1392, one of his friends was almost murdered, and he thought that it was a plot against him and the rest of the royal family and all these things. So he went to like seek his revenge. He like took a bunch of horses and went to go kill the person who tried to kill his friend. And on the way there, it was like super hot and gross. Like they mentioned in all the and everything I read that it was super hot. So just imagine like it's hot and you're dressed like a knight. That sounds terrible. Like in being in a toaster oven. And
Probably not
they
very breathable.
yeah. And he
Why don't
started
you
to like
punch
act
holes in it? Wouldn't you do that? Wouldn't you just like punch a bunch of holes in it so that you can at least get some air in there, some ventilation?
but I feel like that makes it then easier to stab,
Yeah.
you know.
I was
And
literally
he
just trying to do the corollary of like yoga pants right now. And like
mhm.
it's all about breathability. And it's like, I
Yeah,
wonder
exactly.
back then if they thought about breathability, but probably
They
not
did not.
because they were covered in their own shit.
It'd be nice to give one of these nights a pair of yoga pants and just let them like stretch and be like, oh, feel this. I'm not wearing like leather pants under my metal pants. Like this feels very nice.
Very lovely. Very
Yeah.
Vuori.
Yeah. Um, so Charles starts acting kind of weird on this trip. It's getting hot. He's starting to like kind of babble and like get really riled up. And he's kind of feverish. He's getting very impatient because it's not just like him on a horse, it's a whole bunch of people. So like everyone's trying to go. They have stuff, all the things. And at one point, a page who is like a child who was there to help is probably really tired because he's a child. And he drops a lance, like a big sword, and it hits something else and it makes a really, really loud noise. And Charles yells, "Forward against the traitors! They wish to deliver me to my enemy!" And he starts just stabbing. And he kills like four people, including a really important knight. No one was there. He killed his own people. So they had to like subdue him and he went into a coma and he was in a coma for 4 days. And they started like moving him around the country to try to get him like back to Paris and figure out what to do because they were like, that's not good. He just killed a bunch of people on our side because he thought
Well,
something bad
I
was
mean,
happening.
he's a king
Right. So that's why they're like anyone else, you'd be like,
off the
so
head, but this guy, we
yeah.
gotta cover
Uh-huh.
it.
Exactly. So in 1393, he forgot that he was king. He forgot who his wife was. We'll talk about her in a second. He thought he was Saint George. He thought that the lion on his coat of arms was real. So he's like stabbed his own shield. So he's like just like going through a lot of stuff. And this is why he's called Charles the Mad, like in history.
How old?
What
How old is he?
in 1393, I think he's like in his 30s. So it's not like later, and it is. I also feel like this is unscientific, but this is about the time when schizophrenia comes out. He's 25.
Also, aren't these people crazy inbred?
Yeah, there's a little bit of that, but I don't think there is some like sickness in his family that might like the mental illness may come from his mother's side is like what people think. So it's probably like hereditary, and then I'm sure that there's inbreeding in there as well, because there always is in these stories.
Right.
Yeah. So
Okay.
he's at 25, which I think is when schizophrenia like actually starts to manifest for folks who have it. So he also his big thing that you may have heard that I mentioned earlier is he thought that he was made of glass, which is like a syndrome that people can have where they like think that their bones are made of glass and that they're very, very fragile. So he like thought that if anyone touched him or if he fell or anything, that he would shatter. So he would have like iron rods sewn into his clothes so that his like he couldn't move his body very much, and so he was like always protected. He also in 1405 he didn't change his clothes or bathe for 5 months, which is like weird they wrote that down because I feel like no one took a bath
Yeah, I would have
anyway.
assumed that's a natural state of
Yeah.
things. I remember in the last podcast, Black Death episode,
Hmm.
they said that kings in particular wouldn't take baths because it was considered like feminine
Hmm.
and they wanted to look stronger than other men. And so I don't know how I don't know if that was Henry trying to be funny or not, but it doesn't sound crazy to me.
That might be true. And I also remember them talking about how the people whose jobs it was to like literally clean the poop out of the river, they were the ones who had like less black plague because they actually took baths because it was like really obvious that they needed to. Like that was the line. You know, if your
Yeah.
job is to like be around poop, then like you can take a bath.
I also remember the guy who actually fell in to the shit river and drowned, which is
I'm
like
sure
the
there's so many of
worst.
them.
Worst.
It's terrible. Everyone smells bad. It's awful. It's awful. Everyone smells bad, and the king is losing his mind. He probably again had schizophrenia. But they were like, maybe it's sorcery, maybe it's God, maybe it's blah blah blah. So just they didn't know what to do. But they kind of just were like letting him do things and like being around him and trying to make decisions for him. Um, so he was married, like I said, he was married to Isabella of Bavaria and they would have a bunch of kids. Um, and he also had some other kids. There were like 10 with him and one with at least one other person that was like on his Wikipedia page. But just as a side, his daughter Catherine married Henry V, the King of England, and a few kings later we have Henry VIII. So Henry VIII is a direct descendant of Charles VI, the King of France. We've talked about him. Do you remember?
Yeah, he's the one who got
Yeah.
his head cut off. Or
Nope. Yeah.
no,
But you
Marie
know what I mean.
Antoinette was the one that he was married to.
Nope.
Ugh.
He was married to Anne Boleyn, was the first wife that he had her head cut off. That was a long
Okay,
time ago. We talked about
close.
that. And then many of his wives. And then Marie Antoinette did have her head cut off, and we will mention her later too. So lots of that coming up.
They blend
But let's talk,
together.
they blend together. So much royal intrigue. You just don't know where to go, where to start. But okay, let's talk about this party. So this party, the Ball of the Burning Men, is on January 29th, 1393. They decided to throw a masked ball, which sounds awesome. Have you ever been to a masked party?
I
Not like a sex
don't.
party, but
I
like a
don't.
max party.
Probably not.
I went to a theater production, what is it called, in New York, where you go in and you have to wear a mask and everyone like walks around and they do like Macbeth, but they're like the actors are like around there with you. Why can't I remember what it's called? New York.
That sounds fun.
Um, Oh, Sleep No More. I really liked it a lot. It was cool. I went with my friend Elizabeth. So I have the mask here. It's like it was a creepy weird mask, and like everyone walks around. And the actors are like moving in different rooms, and you're supposed to like touch things and like interact with them. Like we followed an actor into like it's in a big building. We followed them into like an indoor cemetery that was like foggy, and he was like doing a speech, and he like handed me his umbrella, so I like held his umbrella. It was cool. But I love in like a movie when they have like a big masked ball and everyone's like dressed really pretty and they're having like a big dance and all of that. So like imagine something like that. Um, and in this case, it's to celebrate one of his wife's ladies in waiting. So one of her like professional girlfriends is getting married, and it is her third wedding. And it sounds like she was widowed twice before. And because it's her third wedding, it's sort of like the party is different. The party is kind of like a making fun of you party, and it's more like crazy than like a regular wedding party because they're like, oh my gosh, your third marriage, who cares? You know?
You know, I
Um,
just found out that Scarlett Johansson's been married 3 times.
yeah. To the Ryan Reynolds and that French guy, and then Colin Jost.
Yeah, I just learned that last night when I was watching the correspondence dinner and was like, why didn't for some I don't know. I don't know. It hit different. It was mostly I was like, you've been married 3 times. Like on the third one, does anybody even care?
For
Like
real.
what are we here
That is
for?
exactly the attitude that we're bringing to this party.
Right, right.
I love that. Yes. Yeah. By the third one, when you're like barely 40, you know,
Yeah.
sure. You do you. But it's not gonna we're not gonna let you wear that white dress and buy you a blender on your third wedding. I'm not doing
Definitely
that.
definitely not.
Um, so it's gonna be a weird dance party, you know, like that's the idea. And the thing that we have talked about, I think several times, how dark history is, like physically dark. Like, as soon as the sun goes down, it is pitch black outside. And in the 14th century at the ball, there would have been like oil lamps and candles and torches like around the room. Maybe someone would be carrying a torch like in the middle of the room. They'd have like a pyre with like a torch in the middle. So that also makes it a little bit like smoky and weird, you know? But that's how you would like see each other. But it wouldn't be like you couldn't see each other well, but you could see each other. And you did again, you're masked, so that's part of the fun. Um, but the king and four of his lords, so four of his guy friends, they dressed as woodwusses, which are wild men of the woods. So it was like a mythological creature that sometimes they have like not like a centaur with like the horse entire body in the head, but like Pan with like the horse feet and legs, but a man body.
Yeah, I can picture
Can you
that.
picture that? So that's what they're dressed like, and they're doing this. They really want like, you know, the king's being the king and he really wants to like get into it. So they make these costumes that are made of linen and they sew them onto their bodies. So like they're tight on their bodies, they're made of linen, they're covered in like resin and wax, and on top of the resin and wax, they push um like hemp, like dried hemp leaves and like hay all over them. So it looks like they're really hairy. And that includes their heads. Their heads are covered by these masks as well that are all like tight linen, the, you know, resin, pitch, wax, and then all of this like flammable material just coming off of them. So they look like they're hairy and they can dance and like fly around.
I
You know,
can see where this is going.
it's not going to end well for most of them. Yes.
Right.
Um, one of the men, his name is Yvan Defoe, he makes a suggestion. He says, "Hey guys, can we please put all the torches in the back of the room, just like around the room, and not have any in the middle anymore? Since I'm wearing this like thing that's gonna catch on fire in 4 seconds." And they were like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, great idea." So they put all the torches in the back, and people are not allowed to bring in torches. So it's even darker than usual. And so they start dancing and they're howling and they're yelling and they're doing all this weird stuff and they're like saying bad things to people and they're trying to get people to guess who they are. And no one really knows that the king is one of these people. His wife does, and like a couple other people do. Obviously, the person who like put him in the costume knows, but like most people don't know the king is part of this group of like dudes doing this weird dance in the middle of the party. Do you like my weird dance? This is what I assume they look like.
Taylor's moving her hands in a very fun, I don't
Jazz
even know,
hands,
jazz handy way. There we
man
go.
of the woods. Um, the king's brother, the Duke of Orleans, He arrives late and he's drunk and he's with his friends and he's like, "Oh, we're here at this party. I guess we'll stop by." And he gets there and he's like, "It's so dark in here. I'm gonna bring my torch." He didn't get the memo. No one told him the no torch rule. And so he walks in and then he's like, "Who are these guys? Like, what is happening? Like, what are these people dancing in the middle of the room? Why are they acting so weird? Like, what is this?" So he takes his torch and he leans in and a spark falls and then they're all on fire. Like, almost immediately. One source says that he threw his torch at them, but he probably just like leaned in too far, and it was just like one piece of that hemp caught fire, and then they were all on fire. Another report says that the dancers were actually like chained together in some way as like part of the dance, so they like barely got away. The only um the only person who well, the king was saved by his aunt, who was 15, but also his aunt, you know, the Duchess of Berry. She threw her dress over him because she saw that it was him. So very smart on the Duchess's part. She had like a big skirt, and she used her skirt to like damp out the fire, so the king survived. One other person jumped into either a barrel of dishwater or wine, depending on who you read, and he stayed in there until the flames went out, and he survived. But four men were burned alive, including the guy who suggested to move the torches to the back, which sucks because he knew it.
One I can see how this could happen because I've been to a party before where I wore a brand new suit. It was the first time I wore it. It wasn't a party. It was like a formal event, and then a bunch of us went somewhere afterwards, like a bar or something.
Uh-huh.
And we were outside, and there was like a guy smoking next to me, and I felt something on my side, and I looked
No.
over and was like, "Oh my God!" He just moved his hand in a way. Like he wasn't trying to be. He wasn't doing it intentionally, but he
Yeah,
burned a
yeah.
hole through like both the top and the inner lining of the coat. It was like the first time I wore it, and I was like, "Oh my God!" So I can, long
Ugh.
story short, I can see how if you just
Yeah.
walk around with a torch that you can light a bunch of people on fire.
And you kind of seem like I'm sure this happened like not all the time, but like often. I'm sure that like if you were around the fire all the time, your clothes had holes in it all the time from fire,
Yeah,
like when
I
you
mean,
watch
what even?
Hoarders and there's a smoker.
Yeah, and also, what even is clothes at this period of time? It's just like
It's a lot
rags.
of like flowy rags, like tunics and stuff that like can definitely catch on fire
Yeah,
in addition to what they were already wearing. So there was a monk who was the monk of St. Denis who wrote about it. I don't know if he was actually there or not, but he wrote, quote, "Four men were burned alive, their flaming genitals dropping to the floor, releasing a stream of blood." Just like
I'm
more
sorry.
info than I
Did you
usually know.
say the flaming genitals?
I did, yeah. I don't
Okay.
know why they were like separate and like enough that they could fall off and like, but it sounds awful.
Yeah, okay.
Um, one of the men survived a day longer, and someone described him as bitterly cursing and insulting his fellow dancers, the dead and the living, until his last breath, because he was so mad, which I would be as well if I were dying. Um, there were also people who were burned, like knights who tried to save people, obviously, because they're wearing their like toaster outfit. So you're in like a fire, you don't want to be dressed like a knight trying to save people. I'm imagining that they're all in full knight outfits, and that's probably wrong. They're probably wearing tunics, but you know what I mean. So
Right.
other people were hurt as well. And then when the public found out, they were like, "This is such an example of like." What are you doing with your money? Like, we're hungry, like yeah, things are getting better, but th we're still not great. And you're spending like this ridiculous amount of money on this party where people are dying, and you're just being so like frivolous. And the king had to parade through the town on a horse and like apologize to people and like donate money in Notre Dame. And then the Duke of Orleans had to donate to a monastery to apologize since it was like all technically his fault. But this is like one of the first incidents that are going to lead to later when we're talking about Marie Antoinette in the French court being really extravagant and like ignoring what normal people need. This is like the beginning of that. And then she's like the end of that, like 200 years later, 300 years later.
Sorry, these dogs
Well,
just ran in here. They're so freaking loud.
no, I
I
didn't
was
even hear him.
I was gonna say, Taylor, like I don't know if this is how people actually felt. I would assume that if I lived back then, I really wouldn't value my life at all because who cares? Like
That's true.
I'm gonna
But
get
also,
cut
like,
down by bacteria, or some fishmonger's gonna throw a bucket of raw fish heads in my face while I'm walking down the street and get me poisoned. Like
yeah,
it's just like every conceivable way a person can die. Like the plague is going around. It's just like who cares? Like be hungry and die because that's kind of what you're all gonna do anyways.
I know, but they started to get this is when they started to get mad about it. To be like, this is something that like you can't like we don't want to see this happen. And also like, people died. It also inspired an Edgar Allan Poe story um called Hop Frog, which is about I didn't read it, but I read the summary, and it's about a the court jester who dresses up like like a man of the woods, and then there's a fire, and it's a lot about this story. I want to read it eventually.
Sorry, so
I
how
like this
many people
story.
died?
I think like four or five.
Okay, so it wasn't the
Not
craziest
yeah,
thing.
not everyone. And like everyone else seemed to get out, but like I think the fire was pretty contained because it was like five guys chained to each other who were highly flammable.
So what happened to the king? What
He just had to apologize and
no,
like,
I know, but like at the end, like
oh,
what
he
was
was
his
just like
life?
a little burned. He was fine after that.
But was he one
And
of
then
these guys who gets beheaded or killed by his own people or
no, and so one thing that happened as a direct result of this um is the Duke of Orleans, people were like definitely more pissed at him than they had been before for like the stuff that he had done. And in 1407, so that's, a couple years later, um, the a man named John the Fearless was the cousin of the Duke of Orleans and Charles VI, and he had the Duke of Orleans assassinated because of, quote, vice, corruption, sorcery, and a long list of public and private villainies. So I feel like there's other stuff that he did, and we could talk more about him at another time too, because that is interesting. And that started a civil war in France. So there was a civil war in France, like in the middle of the last part of the Hundred Years' War as well. So that made a whole bunch of stuff happened. Um, they knew that like the king was, had these like bouts of insanity, and eventually Henry V of England, who was his son-in-law, was able to like move more into France during the Hundred Years' War. So it definitely didn't um help that he wasn't able to like do military things or like pay attention or like do the things they should have done. And this was like part of the thing that like kind of ruined his reputation in that way. In 1420, there was a Treaty of Troyes in where Charles had to disinherit his own son in favor of Henry V. So he had to, instead of being like my son, who is the rightful heir to France, he had to go in favor of Henry V, who was married to his daughter and was the heir of England. So like they made this treaty that people weren't very happy about. And then he died in 1422. I don't know how he died, but I do know that his reign is like a low point in medieval history because he his individual, and we see this like the leader's mental capacity is going to affect the country, and that was what was happening in France. And then later after this, I think the next generation of his family are the ones that will have like Joan of Arc will hang out with them. And I do want to talk about her later too,
yeah, that's a huge one.
because I don't get it. I was going to do it for Women's History Month, but I didn't get to it. But I do want to talk about that because that story is wild. Um, yeah, that's it.
I
That's all I have.
so last night I was every now and then I go do you have YouTube TV? Do you have a subscription to YouTube TV?
No.
Okay, so I have a subscription to it and every now and then when I'm super done with anything on Netflix or anywhere else, I go on their movies options because they
Hmm.
occasionally have good movies. And I had like a moment where I just like dwelled on like the concept of a monarchy because they have this movie on there from the BBC called Charles R, which I guess R's King Charles's like middle name or something.
Hmm.
Um, the making of a monarch. And I was like,
Mm.
there's this picture of him like looking very cool, very British. He has like binoculars. It's a younger picture. He's like probably
Yeah, yeah.
37, 40 years old or something like here. And I started reading the description of it. I'm looking at it right now. It is, quote, celebrating the life and achievements of King Charles III, told in his own words through film, home movies, and television cameras. And I was like, what achievements?
Yeah.
Like what are you talking about? Like it's
And I literally can't get over how it doesn't even matter because the it's his uncle was or like his like great uncle his mom yes his uncle was the one who like stopped being the king or whatever who didn't want to be king because he married the other woman so then like the monarchy shifted anyway it's just like what are you doing?
Yeah. And every now and then, like the only person who I will hear in public media defend the monarchy seems to be Piers Morgan, who will occasionally pop up on random podcasts or whatever else. And it's always like this weird argument of like they help bring the country together and hold it together. And I don't know. I mean, maybe there's a point to that because I'm looking at like what's going on in the United States right now and saying, well, maybe if there was like one person that everybody agreed was the greatest person out there, then that would be a good thing. I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe
they
it is the right way to do things. Actually, now that I'm talking, I'm like convincing myself that maybe that would be the way to
well I've been
go.
thinking about it too and I don't think there is a right way like no one's ever not everyone has ever been okay you know there's like shit's been happening always but if I Google the making of a monarch I don't even get this movie on like the front page of Google. I get something about Scar and the Lion King, and I have to actually put in King Charles to get about the one about him.
Yeah, like it's buried. It's buried in
Yeah.
pretty deep. And for the record, I skipped watching that. Instead, I watched A Bee's Diary, which covers the life of two bees, from when they're born until when they die, which is really
I care about
interesting.
that a lot more.
It
Yeah.
was so fun.
I feel like their
You should
achievements are
watch.
more impressive to
You
me.
should watch it with the kids because the entire time, all I'm thinking to myself is like, how did they film this? Like, they're like inside the hive. Like,
Cool.
what poor intern had to sneak into a bee's hive with video equipment?
Excuse me, guys. Don't mind me. I'm just gonna put this in here. Did you ever watch
Um,
the documentary on dinosaurs on Apple TV?
mm-mm.
It's so good, and they have like they but you have to like remind yourself that it's not real because it's like shows like triceratopses like around a water hole like at night like you've seen real life videos of elephants around a watering hole at night but they do it like triceratopses and you're like this footage is amazing and you're like they don't have this footage this is not real you have to like remind yourself every 5 minutes that it's not real because it's so cool and it looks real.
Are they just like taking out like or just putting CGI Triceratops in there?
I think so, yeah, it's great, it's really cool.
Man, I can't
Yeah,
wait till Jurassic Park comes to life and we can really clone these things into existence.
yeah,
Well, we
they
just
really
took a
deserve.
total left turn, but whatever.
um
That's what we
Cool.
do.
Yeah, I just
So,
want to tell you about that fun, not so fun party. And
uh,
I love the guy coming in and being like, "What's going on, guys? It's dark in here," and like bringing in the torch and like, "Where's my brother?" And, like poking around, and then like all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose.
I know it's usually that guy who's the one who always survives unscathed too.
Totally. He's like, "Ooh, my bad. Ooh,
Oh, I'm
sorry,
just
guys.
gonna leave. This looks really bad.
Mm, mm. This party
Um,
sucks. I'm gonna go."
cool. Well, thanks for sharing that, Taylor. For some of the feedback that we got from the last episode, you'll notice I'm speaking into a much I should sound a lot clearer, which I got some feedback that my audio kind of sucks, but hopefully this sounds better. So let us know.
Yeah.
But is there any other feedback or any other letters or
Um. Yes, I
letters?
actually let me talk about the next one because I have to go get it. I'll talk about that. But on that one, no, thank you. Someone left us gave us feedback, and um, that was really helpful. So even if the feedback is not perfect, let us know. Some stuff like be less bantery. We're not going to do that, but like the sound stuff we'll do, and other stuff we'll do. Give us suggestions.
Why isn't the banter good?
No, I think that here's what I think. I think that our listeners are. I think that we should in actuality do some sort of listener survey to learn about who's actually listening to us because I suspect it's people who like the banter, and like that part of it and like learning a little bit. Don't care to deep dive in because this person left us feedback. They got my card at the Dan Carlin show, which is super cool. It's not that worked and someone listened. But it's also like I said, like we're not Dan Carlin. So if you're looking for a 35-hour podcast about Charles the Sixth, like this isn't it. But if you want to like have something cool to tell people at a party to be like, man, I'm so glad there's lights in here because did you know that in 1393 there was this masked ball? We are here for you.
I reached that conclusion too. So I started I used to listen to Bailey Sarian every now and then. You know Bailey.
Mm-mm.
Murder Makeup Mystery. I think is the name of her show, her YouTube channel, and her podcast. But I would intermittently
Cool.
listen to her, and then today when I was working on the house, I was just like I just played a bunch more episodes on repeat, and
Hmm.
and that's what struck me about it was when I listened to the last podcast on the left, like the depth of research is just like it's just so different. Like what would
Hmm.
they would you know hers like 37 minutes long, like quick little
Hmm.
hey this guy did this thing, here's my take on it, and that's kind of it. Where so anyway, you're also probably joining to hear my dogs bark. I'm gonna go ahead and mute.
I can't hear them at all. No, but I think also like I would love to do that if we had a million listeners and could just do this as our job. I would be amenable to that, and I do try to do as much research as I can. Um, but yeah,
Well, it's about like it's interesting because like you only research the things you hear about, but there's so many stories that aren't told because nobody's found them and
yeah,
spent the time to do them. Like I remember when Serial came out and it was like those people like went to that town, talked to the district attorneys, talked to the police,
hmm,
talked to the like it is a crazy you can do like that's doable, but like you just have to have the resources to do it and
yeah,
very few of us do. So
yep. We're doing our
what
best, and
we're
I,
doing
I
our
don't know. I'm
best.
I'm having a good time.
I'm having a good time too. That being said, Taylor, I'll go ahead and wrap this up. Any final words?
No, please, that feedback can come to us at doomtofailpod@gmail.com, on all the socials at doomtofailpod, and on YouTube as well. We have almost 100 YouTube subscribers, which I think is pretty cool.
That's great.
So there's folks listening there as well, which is nice.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks, Taylor. We'll join you guys later this week.
Thanks.